No one gave you an instruction manual for your body. The day you were born, you may wonder why sometimes, even after 8 full hours of sleep, you still wake up feeling heavy, tired, and restless. It is because your body was resting, but your soul was wandering. When you sleep, your soul can drift away to places your mind cannot follow. It does not bring your brain with it, and that is why you do not remember where it went. During the day, you go to school, you read, you work, you fill your brain with knowledge, but your soul is different. Your soul is like a small, curious child. When your body rests, it wants to run, to jump, to play in strange places, chasing whatever catches its attention. This is something almost no one speaks of, but it quietly shapes how you feel every morning. And that is why tonight I invite you to listen to a Zen story as you fall asleep. Even while your body sinks into slumber, your soul will hear, and like a child fascinated by a tale, it will stay close, listening deeply. While it listens, it learns. While it learns, it grows. And in the morning, you will awaken, not just rested, but aligned. Your energy will be brighter, your path smoother, and good things will find their way to you naturally. The story I'll share with you is not about battles or grand victories. It's about stillness, about the quiet wisdom hidden in simple things. Tonight, we'll walk with a monk and a seeker, and through something as ordinary as a cup of tea, we may find something extraordinary peace. If you've been carrying a heavy heart, or if sleep has felt far away, let this story hold you like a soft blanket. Just listen, let the words flow like water, and if you drift into dreams before the ending, that too is perfectly fine. So, wherever you are, make yourself comfortable. Let your breath slow, and together, let us begin. In the far mountains, where mist curled through pine trees and the wind carried the sound of flowing streams, there was an old monastery. The monastery was not large, nor was it grand, but it was known across villages and towns as a place of stillness. Its walls were plain stone, worn by rain and wind. Its roof tiles were darkened by moss. The halls were quiet, and the only music was the rustle of bamboo, the sweep of brooms, and the occasional sound of chanting rising with the morning sun. In this place lived monks who spent their days in silence, in work, and in study of the way. They tilled the gardens, swept the paths, and cared for one another as the seasons came and went. Among them was an elder monk, a man whose hair had long since turned white, and whose face carried the lines of many winters. He was not famous, nor did he seek fame, but people from distant lands would climb the winding mountain path just to sit with him. They came not because he offered miracles or secrets, but because his words were simple, like the sound of water dripping into a basin. The elder monk often sat in the tea room, a small wooden hall with open windows that looked upon the valley. Here he prepared tea each morning, pouring hot water slowly over the leaves, letting the steam rise like a quiet prayer. To him, the act of drinking tea was not a habit or a luxury, but a way of entering life itself. In the village below, there lived a young man, restless in heart. His name was Wei, and though he was strong of body and quick of mind, he was never at peace. His days were filled with rushing. When he worked in the fields, his mind thought of the market. When he was at the market, he thought of his house. When he sat in his house, he thought of journeys far away. He carried within him the weight of many desires, and even when he smiled, a storm brewed behind his eyes. The elders in the village often told him to slow down, to walk gently, to breathe, but his mind leaped like a monkey from branch to branch. One autumn morning, when the mist lay heavy upon the valley and the mountains looked like islands rising out of a sea of clouds, Wei's heart felt so restless that he could no longer bear it. He had quarreled with his family, snapped at his friends, and even in his sleep he found no rest. That day, he decided to climb the mountain path to the monastery to seek the counsel of the elder monk. His feet grew tired on the stone steps, but his heart beat harder still. By the time he reached the gates, sweat clung to his brow, and his breath came fast. Yet his mind was no quieter than before. The elder monk was in the tea room, as he often was, pouring hot water into a clay teapot. Wei entered and bowed stiffly. The monk looked at him with calm eyes, neither welcoming nor refusing, simply present like a mountain that neither leans forward nor backward. Wei poured out his troubles in hurried words. He spoke of his restlessness, his sleepless nights, his endless thoughts. He spoke of wanting peace, of wanting a mind as still as a pond, of wanting freedom from all the noise inside. The elder monk listened without a single interruption, his hands moving slowly, placing cups on the wooden table, lifting the pot, pouring tea. When Wei finally finished, his chest heaving from speaking so quickly, the monk slid a cup of tea across the table toward him. Steam curled upward, carrying the fragrance of leaves. Wei frowned, unsure what to do. The monk said nothing, only watched him. So Wei lifted the cup and drank. The taste was bitter at first, then warm, then quietly sweet as it lingered. He set the cup down and waited for the elder to speak. The monk simply said, "When drinking tea, just drink tea." Wei stared at him, confused. He wanted a teaching, a method, some great wisdom, but all he received were those few words. He tried to hide his frustration, but it showed in his clenched jaw. The monk poured himself a cup, lifted it with both hands, and drank slowly. His movements were unhurried, as if this small act were the whole universe. Steam rose, lips touched the cup, and the monk's eyes softened as though he were meeting an old friend. He set the cup down, breathing gently, and the silence stretched across the room like a great plain. Wei shifted in his seat. He thought to himself, "I came all this way for nothing but a cup of tea." Yet when he looked again at the monk, he felt something he could not name. The monk's presence was like the mountain itself, steady, unmoving, vast. The taste of the tea still lingered on Wei's tongue, and, for the first time that day, his breath slowed. He did not understand the teaching, but something within him loosened, if only for a moment. The elder monk poured another cup and handed it to him. Again, Wei drank. This time he noticed the warmth in his hands, the smoothness of the clay, the way the steam touched his face. He noticed the sound of the wind outside, the distant call of a bird, the creak of the wooden floor beneath them. All of it was there, all at once, simple and alive. He finished the tea and set the cup down more gently than before. The monk finally spoke again. "Too often," he said, The mind runs everywhere but here. You drink tea, but your thoughts are on yesterday's quarrels or tomorrow's plans. You walk, but you do not feel the ground. You breathe, but you do not notice the air. When you drink tea, just drink tea. Nothing more is needed. Wei bowed his head. Though he still did not fully grasp the meaning, a seed had been planted in his heart. He left the monastery with the taste of tea in his mouth and the echo of the monk's words in his mind. As he walked down the mountain path, he tried to notice each step, the crunch of gravel, the coolness of air. For a brief while, the storm within him grew quiet. That night, when he sat at home, he poured himself a cup of tea. His mind wandered as always, chasing thoughts of work and worry. But then he remembered the elder monk's words. He lifted the cup slowly. He felt the heat against his palms. He watched the steam rise. He sipped and let the flavor settle. For that short moment, he did not chase any thought, did not hurry anywhere. He simply drank tea. The moment passed quickly, but it was enough. A doorway had opened. Wei began to understand that peace was not something far away, not hidden in distant mountains or found only after long journeys. It was present in the simplest acts, waiting to be noticed. But to live this way would take practice, patience, and trust, like tending a garden one seed at a time. The next day he returned to the monastery, and the day after that, again and again. Each time he found the elder monk sitting in the tea room, pouring tea as if it were the first and last thing in the world. Sometimes Wei asked questions. Sometimes the monk answered. Often he did not. But always there was tea, and in the silence of that shared drink, Wei began to taste life itself. Wei returned to the monastery many times, though at first he did not know why. Something in that small tea room drew him back. Perhaps it was the stillness of the elder monk, or perhaps it was the way the tea seemed to carry more than flavor. Each time he arrived, the monk was already there, sitting at the low wooden table. The clay pot before him, the steam rising. The place was always the same, yet each visit felt different. Sometimes the air was cool with morning mist, sometimes heavy with afternoon sun, sometimes touched by the sound of rain tapping on the roof. Wei noticed how the monk never hurried, never wasted movement, never seemed distracted. Whether lifting the pot, pouring the water, or setting down the cup, it was all done with the same quiet care. At first, Wei tried to imitate him. He sat as straight as he could, held the cup with both hands, tried to move slowly. But inside, his thoughts still jumped and raced. He thought of how he looked, of whether he was doing it right, of whether he was making progress. The monk never corrected him, never scolded. He simply poured tea and drank, sometimes smiling gently, sometimes saying nothing at all. This silence, which once made Wei impatient, now began to feel like a mirror. In that silence, Wei heard his own restlessness more clearly, as if the quiet walls reflected his racing mind back to him. One morning, as the pale light spread over the valley, Wei climbed the stone path with heavy steps. His head was full of worries about his family, debts, and the endless tasks waiting for him in the village. By the time he entered the tea room, his heart was already troubled. The elder monk poured tea and slid the cup toward him. Wei took it, but as he lifted it to his lips, he spilled a little onto the table. Embarrassed, he quickly wiped it with his sleeve. He muttered that his mind was too full, that he could not concentrate, that peace seemed impossible. The monk did not reply. He simply poured again, filled another cup, and lifted it slowly. He raised it to his lips, drank, and set it down with care. Then he looked at Wei and said softly, "When the hand is unsteady, the tea spills. When the mind is restless, life spills." These words sank into Wei's chest. He realized that he had always lived as though running, spilling his energy everywhere. He rarely gave himself fully to anything. When he worked, he dreamed. When he dreamed, he worried. When he worried, he rushed. The monk's words showed him that his restless mind was not only his own burden, but also the reason why life felt so scattered. From that day, Wei tried something different. He began to notice the small acts of daily life, not only at the monastery, but also in his own village. When he washed his hands, he tried to feel the water. When he ate, he tried to taste each bite. When he walked, he listened to the sound of his feet against the earth. It was not easy. Often his mind wandered away again, but each time he remembered the monk's teaching, he returned. Drink tea, just drink tea. Walk, just walk. Work, just work. One afternoon, he sat with the monk as rain fell steadily outside. The drops pattered against the roof. The air smelled of wet earth, and the world beyond the window looked blurred, as though wrapped in a silver curtain. The monk poured tea as usual, but this time Wei noticed something new. The steam rising from the cup seemed to merge with the mist outside, as if there was no boundary between inside and outside, between himself and the rain. He felt a strange calm, not forced, not grasped, but natural, like a leaf floating on water. For the first time, he did not hurry his sip. He let the tea rest on his tongue, warm his throat, settle in his belly. He did not think about yesterday or tomorrow. He was simply there, in the moment, rain outside, tea inside, nothing missing. That evening, as he descended the mountain, he felt no storm inside. His feet were light, his breath easy. He passed farmers carrying baskets, children running through the mud, smoke rising from kitchens, and all of it seemed vivid, alive. He thought to himself, perhaps this is what the monk means. Peace is not far away. It is right here, hidden beneath the noise of my own thoughts. But habits are strong, and Wei soon discovered that his old restlessness returned often. One day, while working in the fields, he found himself lost in anger. A neighbor had spoken harshly to him, and he carried the words like a heavy stone. All day his hands worked, but his mind replayed the quarrel again and again. That night he climbed the mountain with his chest burning. He told the monk about his anger, how it consumed him, how he could not let it go. The monk poured tea as always, but this time he handed Wei the pot and asked him to pour. Wei hesitated, then lifted the pot. His hand trembled slightly, and he spilled water onto the table. The monk said, "Do you see how you hold the pot? Too tight, too hard, as if you are fighting it? That is why it spills. The mind is the same. Hold it gently. Do not grasp. Do not force. Then nothing spills." Wei stared at the spilled tea, the drops shining on the wood like tiny mirrors. He realized how tightly he held not only the pot, but also his anger, his worries, his desires. He always clutched everything so hard that it spilled into his life, making a mess. Slowly, he set the pot down, breathed deeply, and felt the tension ease. That night he walked home under a clear sky. The stars shimmered above, countless and silent. He thought of the monk's words and the spilled tea. He promised himself to hold life more gently, to let go of the tight grip that only caused pain. In the weeks that followed, he practiced this. When anger arose, he noticed it but did not feed it. When worry appeared, he breathed and let it pass like a cloud. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed, but each attempt taught him patience. And always he returned to the tea. Every evening he brewed a cup for himself, holding it as the monk had shown, feeling the warmth, drinking slowly, fully present. Each cup was a reminder, a practice, a return to stillness. The villagers noticed a change in him. He no longer quarreled as quickly. His words grew softer. He laughed more easily, even at small things. Some asked him what had happened. He simply said, "I learned to drink tea." They laughed, not understanding, but Wei did not mind. He knew that words could not capture it fully. It had to be lived. Yet deep inside, Wei sensed that his journey was only beginning. The elder monk's teaching was simple, but its depth was like the valley mist-soft on the surface, endless when entered. Each visit to the tea room revealed another layer, another reflection of his own heart. Wei began to see that the practice of drinking tea was not about tea at all. It was about living each moment completely, without running away, without clinging. The path ahead was long, but Wei no longer sought to reach the end quickly. He was learning, one sip at a time, that peace is not a distant place, but the very act of being present here and now. The mountain monastery lived by the rhythm of simple sounds. At dawn, the wooden bell rang through the mist, echoing across the valley like a voice calling all things awake. At noon, the sound of gongs drifted through the pine trees, and in the evening, chants rose gently before silence fell again. Wei grew familiar with these sounds as he visited more often. They became markers of his own breathing, guiding him into a pace slower than the rush of village life. One morning, when the mist was thick and the path slippery with dew, Wei climbed once more to the tea room. The elder monk was already seated, as always, his back straight, his hands resting calmly. The pot steamed between them. Wei bowed, sat, and accepted the cup that was poured. He drank slowly, remembering the monk's words, "When drinking tea, just drink tea." He felt the warmth spread through his chest, the flavor resting on his tongue. The monk set his cup down and asked, "What do you hear?" Wei tilted his head. Outside there was birdsong, the sound of wind stirring bamboo, the faint trickle of water from a distant stream. He listed them softly, unsure if this was the right answer. The monk shook his head gently. "You only heard what was outside. What do you hear inside?" Wei frowned. He closed his eyes. At first, all he noticed was the noise of thought tasks waiting at home, memories of quarrels, plans for the future. Beneath that, he heard his own breath, uneven, shallow. Beneath that, his heartbeat. The monk waited silently. Finally, Wei opened his eyes and said, I hear my mind, never still. The monk nodded. The tea can be silent, yet the cup rattles if the hand trembles. Life is the same. Your world outside may be calm, but if the mind shakes, nothing feels steady. These words lingered in Wei's mind as he descended the mountain that day. He realized that he had been so busy noticing the outside that he rarely listened within. He began to practice listening, not only to sounds but also to the movements of his own thoughts. When anger rose, he heard its sharp edge. When worry came, he heard its restless hum. Listening did not remove them, but it helped him see them as passing sounds rather than unshakable truths. One evening, the village held a gathering. Lanterns lit the square, drums beat, children laughed, and the air smelled of roasted food. Wei joined but found himself unsettled. The noise of the crowd, the clamor of voices, the pressing of bodies all stirred his chest into unease. He remembered the monk's question, "What do you hear?" Closing his eyes briefly, he listened within. Beneath the noise of the festival, he heard his own breath. He focused on it, steadying himself, and suddenly the crowd no longer overwhelmed him. The sounds became part of the night, not an enemy. Weeks passed, and Wei's practice deepened. He returned to the monastery whenever he could, drinking tea with the monk, listening to silence, learning to hear both outside and inside. Yet one day, trouble came. A storm swept across the valley. Rain poured in heavy sheets, winds bent the trees, and the river swelled beyond its banks. Fields were flooded, homes damaged, animals swept away. The village was in chaos. People shouted, rushed, argued. Wei, too, felt his chest tighten with fear. His family's house stood near the river, and the water threatened to break its walls. He spent hours piling stones, moving belongings, shouting instructions. His body worked fiercely, but his mind trembled like a cup rattling in unsteady hands. When the storm finally eased, exhaustion filled him. His home survived, though much was lost. That night he could not sleep. His thoughts churned with fear of what might have been, anger at what was lost, worry about what still might come. At dawn, though his body ached, he climbed the mountain once more. In the tea room, the monk poured silently. Wei drank, but his hands shook. The monk asked, "What do you hear now?" Wei lowered his head. "I hear only storms," he said. "The storm is outside, but it also lives within me." The monk nodded. Then he rang a small bell beside him. The clear sound filled the room, bright and sharp, then slowly faded into silence. After a long while, he said, "The storm rages, yet the bell still sings. The sound fades, but the bell remains. Be like the bell. Let the storm pass. Do not mistake the storm for yourself." These words struck Wei deeply. He realized that he had always believed his fears and anger were himself, that they defined him, but perhaps they were only storms passing through. Beneath them, something steady remained, like the bell itself. That night, back in his village, he sat by a small lamp. The world was still wet and broken from the storm, but he closed his eyes and listened. He heard his mind trembling, his chest heavy with worry, but beneath that, he sensed a quiet place, like the bell waiting after its sound fades. He held on to that quiet, not as grasping but as noticing. Slowly, His breath softened, and he fell into the first deep sleep he had known since the storm. From then on, whenever trouble came, Wei remembered the bell. When quarreling voices rose in the market, he breathed and thought, "These are passing storms." When his own anger boiled, he told himself, "I am not the storm, I am the bell." Slowly, he learned to let storms come and go without being carried away. The villagers began to notice even more. When floods ruined crops, Wei worked calmly while others despaired. When arguments broke out, his words soothed instead of inflamed. People turned to him for advice, and though he felt unworthy, he shared what little he had learned. He told them of the monk, of the tea, of the bell. Some laughed, some listened, some dismissed him, but Wei did not mind. He knew the teaching was not for everyone's ears, but for anyone's heart who was ready. One late afternoon, he climbed to the monastery again. The sky glowed orange, the valley bathed in fading light. He entered the tea room and bowed. The monk poured, as always. After they drank, Wei said softly, "Master, I think I understand a little. Tea teaches me to be here. The bell teaches me not to be the storm." The monk smiled gently. Then he said, "But do not cling even to these lessons. Tea is tea, bell is bell. The moment is always new." Wei lowered his head, humbled. He realized that even teachings could become chains if held too tightly. To live freely was to meet each sip, each sound, each breath as new, as if for the first time. As night fell, he walked down the mountain path. The wind was cool, the stars beginning to show. Each step was steady, each breath gentle. He thought of the tea, the bell, the storm, and smiled. Life was still full of troubles, yet within them, peace could always be found. One sip, one sound, one breath at a time. The seasons turned on the mountain as gently as pages in a book. Spring carried blossoms and soft rains. Summer brought warmth and buzzing insects. Autumn colored the leaves with fire, and winter laid down quiet snow. Wei's visits to the monastery stretched across these seasons, each one leaving a mark on him as subtle as dew soaking into the soil. The elder monk remained the same through it all, calm as a stone in the river, drinking tea with the same patient hands, teaching little but showing much. Wei's life in the village, however, still carried storms. His father grew ill one winter, and Wei spent long nights caring for him, listening to his shallow breath. He tried to practice what he had learned, to be the bell, to drink tea in the moment, but fear pressed hard against his chest. One night, unable to bear it, he climbed the mountain despite the snow and cold. The elder monk welcomed him with tea, the steam rising into the chilly air. Wei's voice trembled as he said, "My father may not live long. I cannot accept this. I fear the day he is gone." The monk poured tea and handed him a cup. Then he said, "This tea is hot. Soon it will cool. Later it will be gone. Do you grieve the steam when it fades?" Wei frowned. "Steam is not life." The monk looked at him kindly. "But life is like steam, rising, fading, returning to the air. You drink tea, it warms you, then it is gone. Yet do you not cherish it more because it is brief?" Wei lowered his eyes. His hands trembled on the cup. He wanted to argue, to refuse the teaching, but the truth in it stung. He drank, and the tea indeed was hot, fragrant, fleeting. He thought of his father's life, his own life, every life brief as steam. Tears welled in his eyes, but for the first time, he felt the edge of acceptance. When his father finally passed, Wei grieved deeply. Yet in his grief, he remembered the monk's words. He sat quietly with his family, drinking tea, letting the warmth remind him that even passing moments carry beauty. His sorrow did not vanish, but it softened. He wept like rain falling on earth, natural, unforced, and beneath the weeping, there was also peace. After the funeral, Wei visited the monastery again. He bowed to the monk and said, "I have lost my father, yet I also feel him in the steam of tea, in the wind across the valley. He is gone, and yet not gone." The monk nodded, pouring tea. "Life flows like a river," he said. "Each drop changes, yet the river remains. We too are drops in that river." From then on, Wei began to see time differently. He no longer clung so tightly to each moment, nor did he push it away. He let it flow. When joy came, he embraced it without fear of its end. When sorrow came, he allowed it without resistance. Like tea cooling in the cup, like rivers moving to the sea, all things passed, and all things belong. As years moved on, the villagers began to see Wei as more than just a farmer. They came to him for advice, for comfort, for calm presence. When disputes broke out, he spoke gently. When grief visited others, he sat with them in silence, sometimes offering nothing more than tea. He did not call himself a teacher, yet his life itself became teaching. One evening, a young boy from the village followed Wei to the monastery. The boy was restless, his mind full of questions, his heart eager for answers. He sat in the tea room with Wei and the elder monk, watching the steam rise from the cups. Finally, the boy asked, "Master, what is the meaning of life?" The monk smiled and poured him tea. The boy looked puzzled but drank. When he finished, the monk asked, "How did it taste?" The boy thought for a moment. "Warm, a little bitter, then sweet." The monk said, "That is the meaning of life. Warm, bitter, sweet. Drink it fully. Do not miss it while asking for meaning." The boy laughed, though he did not fully understand. Wei watched quietly, remembering his own first visit, when the monk had said only, "When drinking tea, just drink tea." Years later, the words still rippled through him like water over stones. The seasons turned again, and Wei grew older. His hair began to grey, his hands bore lines of labor, but his heart was lighter than in his youth. One day, as he climbed the mountain, he noticed how slow his steps had become, how heavy his breath. Yet instead of frustration, he felt gratitude. Each step was its own gift, each breath its own life. In the tea room, the monk poured as always. Wei bowed and said, "Master, time is carrying me forward, and I feel the river flowing swiftly now." The monk smiled softly. "Then float gently," he said. "Do not fight the river." Wei sat in silence, sipping his tea, watching the mist drift across the valley. He thought of his youth, of anger and restlessness, of storms and grief. He thought of the countless cups of tea he had shared with the monk, each one the same, each one different. He thought of how simple words had guided him through seasons of change. As the day faded, the bell rang in the monastery, its sound drifting across the valley. Wei closed his eyes and listened. Beneath the sound, he heard silence. Beneath the silence, he felt the river of time carrying all things. He opened his eyes, lifted his cup, and drank fully, present, alive, grateful. That night, walking down the mountain, he looked at the stars, bright and endless. For the first time, he did not wonder what lay beyond them. He simply looked, simply breathed, simply walked, like drinking tea. The years drifted like mist across the valley, soft and unhurried, and Wei grew old. His hair turned white, his back bent, his steps slowed. Yet, though his body weakened, his heart grew lighter with each season. He still worked the fields as much as he could, still brewed tea each evening, still visited the monastery whenever his strength allowed. His neighbors now called him Elder Wei, and when they sought comfort or guidance, they came to him as they once came to the monk. He never claimed wisdom. He only offered presence, a listening ear, sometimes a cup of tea. One late autumn, when the leaves had turned red and gold, Wei climbed the mountain path once more. The air was crisp, and each breath felt sharp but clean. His legs shook with the effort, and he rested often, but his heart urged him upward. When he reached the monastery gates, he paused, leaning on his staff, gazing at the familiar stones. He realized how many years had passed since his first climb, when his heart was restless and stormy. Now, standing here as an old man, he felt as though he had lived many lives within one. He entered the tea room. The elder monk was there, as always, seated with the clay pot before him, steam rising gently. But this time, Wei noticed the monk's hands trembled faintly, his face more lined, his hair thinner. The monk, too, had grown old. They bowed to one another. No words were spoken at first. The monk poured tea, slow and steady despite his shaking hands. Wei accepted the cup, cradling it carefully, as though it were the most precious thing in the world. They drank in silence, the steam curling upward, the flavor lingering. After a while, the monk spoke softly. Wei, you have walked a long path. What have you found? Wei lowered his eyes, thinking carefully. He said, I have found that peace is not far away. It is here, in this cup, in each breath, in each step. I have found that storms come and go, but the bell remains. I have found that time flows like a river, and all we can do is float gently. The monk nodded, his eyes soft. Then he said, and do you cling to these findings? Wei shook his head. No, master. I drink them as I drink tea fully, then let them go. The monk smiled faintly. Then you have learned. They sat together long into the evening, drinking cup after cup, as the sky outside turned from gold to deep blue, and stars emerged one by one. The silence between them was no longer a teacher nor a test. It was simply companionship to lives shared across time, bound by tea, by breath, by presence. Winter came soon after. Snow covered the valley, and Wei could not climb the mountain often. His body grew weaker, and he spent most days inside, sitting by the fire, holding his cup of tea, watching steam rise and fade. He did not fear this weakness. He accepted it as he accepted the cooling of tea, the falling of snow, the fading of the day. Life had taught him to hold all things gently, even his own breath. One night, as the fire burned low, Wei dreamed of the mountain path. He dreamed he was young again, climbing swiftly, heart racing. He reached the tea room, and the monk poured for him. When he drank, the taste was bright as spring water, warm as summer sun, rich as autumn harvest, quiet as winter snow. He woke with a smile, knowing his time was near. The next morning, with the help of his family, he climbed the mountain one last time. His steps were slow, his breath shallow, but his heart was steady. When he reached the monastery, the monks welcomed him, guiding him to the tea room. The elder monk was already there, waiting. His hands shook more than before, his body frail, but his presence was still like the mountain, unmoving, vast. They bowed, then sat. The monk poured what both of them knew would be their last shared tea. They lifted their cups together, hands trembling, eyes meeting. Wei drank slowly, tasting every drop, letting it fill his whole being. He set the cup down gently and whispered, "When drinking tea, just drink tea." The monk's eyes glistened. He nodded, smiling softly. They sat in silence, steam fading into the cold air, night falling outside. At last, Wei bowed deeply, touching his forehead to the floor. When he rose, he felt no sorrow, only gratitude. He left the tea room, walked down the mountain path, and returned to his home. That night, he lay down, closed his eyes, and breathed gently. His last breath was as soft as steam fading into air. In the monastery, the elder monk continued to pour tea each morning, though fewer visitors came. One winter day, he too grew too weak to rise. He asked a younger monk to bring the clay pot to pour one final cup. He held it with trembling hands, drank slowly, then whispered the same words he had given long ago. "When drinking tea, just drink tea." He set the cup down, closed his eyes, and passed as quietly as a flame, fading into stillness. Years later, villagers still spoke of Wei and the monk. They told stories of their calmness, their kindness, their simple wisdom. But the truest teaching was not in words or stories. It was in the act of brewing tea, of drinking slowly, of being fully present. Children grew, farmers worked, families lived and died, and through it all, cups of tea were lifted, steam rose and faded, and the wisdom lived on. Quiet as the mountain, simple as breath. When drinking tea, just drink tea. My friend, as we close our story tonight, I want you to take a quiet breath and think of a simple moment in your own life. It could be the warmth of a cup of tea, the sound of rain on your window, or even the steady beat of your own heart. These small things are not distractions from life, they are life itself. The old monk's words remind us that peace does not live in faraway places. It lives right here, in the simplest act of being present. When drinking tea, just drink tea. When walking, just walk. When resting, just rest. Nothing more is needed. So whatever troubles you carried into this evening, set them down for now. Let your thoughts soften, let your breath guide you, and remember that each moment can be whole if you meet it fully. If this story brought you calm, I invite you to stay with me again next time. Subscribe to The Sleepless Librarian, and together we will keep exploring wisdom through gentle tales, one story at a time. Now, may your night be peaceful, your heart be light, and your dreams flow like a quiet river.